both Paul and I come from pretty deep, like free-to-play monetization, pay-to-win, sort of that sort of free-to-play background.
Totally.
So to the extent that we can help, we'd love to try. I mean, there's certainly other techniques and concepts that we know that could potentially be helpful to you from a kid's perspective. But our main specialization is primarily in like hardcore monetization design and things like that. And here's Paul.
Hey guys, how you guys doing?
Hey there.
But I thought we could start by just kind of going over, if you guys could tell us a little bit about yourselves and then about Super Awesome, kind of like, the history of the company, the kind of products you guys are working on, and then transition to like, what are the specific problems you guys are looking at and how we could potentially help out.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Paul, do you want to kick us off or I can kick us off?
I can go. So I'm Paul Nunn. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Super Awesome. I find myself here via Outfit 7. So I'm Managing Director of Outfit 7. So I was in the same area as you, making scale apps that had lots of monetization solutions in, had a very broad audience, a very large audience, not specifically focused on kids. It's quite interesting how Tim and myself have found ourselves both at Super Awesome looking at the kids market, because we both came from different perspectives. He came from a specific developer who was looking at the kids market all along, Toka, one of the leading companies in the world making apps specifically for the kids and family market. And I found myself here via an app company that found itself in the kids space by accident. We made an app which was based around a talking cat, and when it exploded in terms of audience, we found ourselves making I was releasing YouTube channels and making animated content and cartoons on Cartoon Network and Netflix, but we really didn't intend to be making a kids content business alongside the app business, and we didn't really intend for COPPA to come in and regulate that we had a huge two distinct audiences that we needed to manage very differently. So I found myself in the kids space by de facto cause of having a huge audience, a global app audience, I guess. But both of us now work in the kids space. I was working at Outfit 7. I was looking at how to deal with this huge kids audience that we had, and I was out there searching in my role for anyone who could help us to educate us more on COPPA. We had lots of lawyers telling us about it, but I wanted to know about the technology available, what options there were for social, for ROI, for all the build tools that were required, and I found myself speaking to Super Awesome, and then cut to a few years later, and here I am working in the space. So that's my journey. I now work at Super Awesome. We'll talk a bit more about what we do, I guess, in a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm my name's Tim. I just joined Super Awesome about a month ago, and so I came from Tokaboka, which is, as Paul mentioned, it's a premium app developer. It's a really big in the kids gaming category. It's a premium app, so it's not one of those freemium games where you're like showing advertising or in-app purchases, one-time pay, and you get to play forever. And that's interesting because most of the apps in the kids space are not like that, right? So it's very hard to survive like that, but we're one of the few players that can survive.
Yeah, it was a good product. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I found myself going to Super Awesome because I'm just really passionate about the kids space and making sure that there's great quality content, but also, coming to Super Awesome, learning about like all the different challenges that, there's so many games that are mixed audiences, right? You can't really age gate them out because that would be a better user experience, but also there are a lot of kids on like platforms they necessarily probably should not be on. Right. So that's like one of those interesting challenges as I'm looking into this space, talking to a lot of like more like mixed audience companies. I know they're thinking about it, but whether they have the right solutions or tools, I don't know, where their heads are at. So kind of just wanted to reach out and set up a discussion about like, you guys are from the gaming, like more of the free to play, like hardcore gaming space. Want to just like, throw out some thoughts and like just have a nice conversation around that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So in terms of like the specific product you guys are focused on now, is there a specific game that you guys are working on? And is there any specific issue with respect to the game that we could help on?
there isn't a specific game that we work on. I think so Super Awesome is a kid tech company. We would say the leading kid tech company. We probably traveled the world speaking about kid tech for a long time before people even knew what kid tech was or acknowledged that it existed. I think our mission is to make the internet safer for kids, which I think we can all get behind. I think Tim's point is very valid. We try to do that by making that technology that will help brands, content creators, app developers to have to make the best kids experiences they can. I think crucially that is split into two categories, right? There are people that are trying to make the best kids games and apps that they can, and there's some great people trying to do that. And our job there is to make sure that they can have a sustainable product, to make sure that no idea dies because there isn't sufficient technology or ROI potential for that product to thrive in the world. We share that with the big platforms, but we've kind of taken on a lot of responsibility to try and make sustainability and ROI work in the kids space. And then there's another category where you have huge platforms and huge games who end up with a kids audience without really aiming for it. Huge
like
apps.
Fortnite, right?
Yeah, Fortnite, I think, but lots and lots of others, and pretty much every platform on the internet. And in those cases, we really have the role to make sure that kids aren't seen as valueless, because I think that's the biggest threat. Like we always talk internally about the 3 stages of the internet when it comes to kids. Like the stage 1 is just pretend they don't exist. Every platform made a 13+ privacy policy. Every social network, every game has everything regulated for 13+ because of the stringent COPPA regulations. We would say the second stage is to kind of use all the technology we already have and try and make it applicable to the kids market. And that has seen huge fines for people using inappropriate technology, collecting data when they don't mean to, when they don't want to, but they've just got the wrong technology stack. And then the third stage, hopefully we're working on, which is to build specific technology, specific video players, ROI tools like ad servers, specific game building technology and platforms that allow you to build safe products for kids, or allow you to build safe features into your products for the kids market.
Right. So maybe I could share my screen real quick and just kind of looking at your website. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just talk through some of your existing products. So it looks like there's something called Awesome Ads, Pop Jam, Kids Web Service. Like right now, what are the 1 or 2 products that have the most traction? And maybe you could describe a little bit about what those products do.
Of course, yeah, sure. I think generally speaking, our products are split into 3 categories. There's stuff that is aiming to provide ROI. So that's one of the main problems you have in the industry. So Awesome Ads at the top there is an ad server. It obviously has 2 sides for us. It's an ad platform which is built specifically for the kids market. So the first point there is, as you can see, it's got huge scale because a lot of developers and a lot of sites and apps and games have integrated it because they want specific kids ads. There's 2 areas that require special treatment in terms of the ad server. First of all, we built it completely from the ground up for privacy. No PII is traded within our ad server. It won't allow any child to be tracked. None of the usual measures around ad tech can collect data on the user. So that's one big area from the legal perspective. And then the other side is kids context is required, right? If you've got a great game that's built for kids and you want to use ads as a source of monetization, which is prevalent in television and everywhere else, then you really want kids ads, right? You don't want beer ads, you don't want context inappropriate ads. So all of the ads that go through our systems are vetted by humans, and they adhere to all of the regulations around advertising to kids, but they're also contextually right for the kids audience. So ROI is there. If you look down the list, actually, so stuff like in the list at the top of our products, if you look at stuff like the kidfluencer activity, that's again stuff that is used for marketers and advertisers to reach kids safely. That's another big area of the industry that we work on, is to build the tools so that the CMOs in the kids space can work safely within the environment, an environment that we live in today, where kids are fractured all across the internet in third-party platforms like YouTube, or certainly not in the places they used to be, which is just on 5 or 6 TV channels and those kind of things. So those tools are specifically to drive ROI into the kids space and distribute it to developers, sites, apps, virtual worlds, those kind of places where kids are now.
Got it. Just so I understand kidfluencers, so you're working with influencers that target kids, and you're just making sure that if an advertiser wants to work with them, these are sort of super awesome, approved, safe, that sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly that kind of thing. So we would step in the middle there, and we don't represent any talent, but we work with talent to educate the market on how they can work with brands, how they can make content safely, how they can navigate YouTube with
Okay.
the platform around them changing. The YouTube platform is built for over 13. It's explicitly not got any kids on it, but it's got lots of kids content. So it's
Sure.
about educating the market, helping those people to navigate. And then you have PopJam there, which is our social tools. This is a really good example of how this is required is stuff like YouTube embed video player in an app. So lots of apps would extend into video content. They would have video play buttons to engage in a deeper level with the audience. We did it at Outfit 7. When you have a kids audience, you can't use a YouTube embed anymore because it collects data at the back end. You can't use any social plugins or tools. So what do you do? Like there was a void there. So we actually acquired at the start a product called PopJam, which was a kind of an Instagram for kids social product.
Yeah.
We rebuilt it at the back end to be a series of plug-inable tools for sites and apps. You want to create a really vibrant environment for your kids' audience with like buttons and shares and comments and video and those kind of things. We've
Right.
built all of the tools so that you can do that. So there is a front end kids experience, an app that they can use, but there's also a load of back end tools that brands can use to engage with kids' audiences in a deeper level.
Got it. And then of these products, what's the product that's got the most traction? Would that be Awesome Ads?
So Awesome Ads is probably the widest used. We have a marketplace which extends to hundreds of publishers, including lots of app developers and sites and games and everyone else. So it's the largest kids marketplace in the world. So that's definitely the widest used product. I would say one of the fastest growing, and the area that Tim is focused on more, is our licensable SaaS tool. So the stuff you see there for kids web services. This is the other big challenge in the kids space. Is it's just simply harder to build stuff in the kids space, right? If you're a developer and you want to build an app for adults, you can build one in a day if you're good. You can take third-party libraries. You can take a video player, take an analytics package, take an ads package. You can use any number of different toolkits and tools to build your product. Whereas in the kids space, all of those are redundant. They all collect data. They all don't really think about the compliance regulations that adhere to the kids' environment. So,
so this is basically a set of tools that people can use just to make sure.
Develop a toolkit. Exactly. So you can. Okay. The idea of these tools is you can go on make the product that you want for kids. We'll abstract away all of the legal complexity, the data storage, the parent portals, the permissioning, the authentication, the verification, and we'll take all of that away and make sure that you can just build the best product you can for the audience of kids that you have.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds of the stuff that you talked about, it definitely seems like the one that's closest to having product market fit at scale is Awesome Ads, just because there are a lot of, what would be considered, kid directed or that sort of a game, because it's using like, let's say it's using a brand that does attract a lot of kids. And so, whether it's like a Sonic, which is, brand I worked with when I was at Sega, or Minions for Minion Rush, like being able to be very careful about the ads that are being shown. Sounds like that would be very, very valuable and useful. I just wonder though, how are you guys getting distribution? Because, when I, in the previous companies that I've been, when we talk about trying to, integrate AdMon into a game, you guys unfortunately have not sort of come up as a name. And wondering if you guys have thought about, so one, are you guys are basically acting as an ad network? Am I correct in that? Or and how do people plug you guys in?
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, I think that you're quite right that the first, I suppose, the tip of the arrow when it comes to speaking to publishers about the kids space is usually the ROI portion, right? We need to prove the value of the audience to try and derive some ROI, and then we kind of lead to the wider conversations that lead to the social tools and the build tools to open up new features for engagement with the audience. First of all, you need to provide value, which I said straight off the bat is what we aim to do around the kids audience that developers have. I mean, a lot of the people that you mentioned there, including a lot of places you used to work, we currently work with them. So they do get to that audience. I think increasingly the regulation around the world is pushing people to value the audience of kids in terms of the way that they treat them. The common a kind of assumption that ignorance is bliss around this stuff. I know it because I was a developer myself. You kind of put an age gate in years ago and hoped that the kids audience was very small because that was going to remove a lot of the ROI you were going to get from the main audience. Is kind of a bit more redundant now. I think people understand that the privacy regulations, the recent App Store changes, I suppose, are another example of the kid space not going anywhere. It's going to become more and more apparent that developers need to treat the kids in their audience, isolate those users and treat them in a different way. I think that in terms of providing evidence of the value, we have a ton of growth in the space. One of the things that we do is obviously, as a byproduct of integrating our technology in a number of publishers, is we facilitate the move of ad dollars into the space from the TV market. TV market is declining in terms of viewership. The ad dollars are catching up very, very slowly. It's probably one of the last spaces where the digital transition of marketing budgets has not moved across at a significant rate at this point. And as that happens, we're providing more and more input in terms of revenue to developers, to sites and apps who have kids audiences, and we're kind of facilitating more and more and more of a conversation around this audience. But I think if you line up the ROI you get from your kids users to the ROI you get from your adult users, there isn't a competition at the moment because it's a completely different space, a completely different time in that space.
Yeah,
So,
I guess one thing I worry about is if, for example, in a kid-directed type of game or app, whether all the developer would do is basically turn off behavioral targeting, and then you're just kind of going in as just another sort of ad network competing with the other ad networks, either within the waterfall or in a programmatic sense, whether in the sort of header bidding type of environment.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a legitimate concern. I would say that's very much offset by specific publishers. The description that you made of allowing ad sources in from the open market based only on the privacy concerns completely belies the fact that you could have any number of financial services. You could have inappropriate ads in terms of context flowing into your product. You could devalue it in a great way. You mentioned some very
I guess I'm just concerned people will just do that and do like some blacklisting, like, okay, we're not going to allow, alcohol-based, tobacco-based, marijuana, blah, 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 and just like blacklist that stuff. Or, because like using you guys obviously would be a safer sort of choice, but I'm not sure if in practice I've been seeing people who would like, even in child-directed apps, say, okay, is there like, some specific setting where it's just like, kid safe and, pulling all the super awesome inventory or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's some complexity under that. So the current situation you describe relies on the honor system of the COPPA flag, which is getting regulated better, obviously, but it still isn't perfect. We don't trade any PIR in an ad server. If you're a publisher that is really valuing and being future-proof, we would argue, then you're looking for solutions that have zero data and not trying to use adult technology with the flag system. We know that's broken. We've built tools that have looked into the open market in terms of programmatic advertising, and there's any number of daisy-chained pixels and trackers within every ad creative. We've built solutions to protect brands against that kind of thing in the open market. Our tools are very varied in terms of usage for the publishers you describe. But in general, I would say that the market is moving towards the fact that you value your kids' audience. And like when we built the mediation stack for Outfit 7, one thing we did not want was less options in terms of that stack. Yield optimization goes up when you have as many parties as you can competing for your inventory. So if we continue to grow at the rate that we're growing, then we're just going to be a voice in the argument. We don't argue that any developer particularly switches off all of the stuff around us and just uses us. What we argue is that they listen to what we've got to say. They use our technology and our tools to safeguard themselves and their kids' audience to provide more ROI over time.
Yeah. So, I mean, one, I feel like the mission that you guys are working on is fantastic, right? Just generally providing a more kid-friendly, kid-safe, sort of ecosystem so that, kids are safer. More and more kids are playing, sort of phone and tablet-based games, and so I think it's great what you guys are doing. What are there any other sort of products or ways in which you guys think that you can provide specific tools to help developers with launch and help monetize kid-directed apps?
Yeah, so one of the things I can jump in on this that Paul was mentioning about kids web services. So we're noticing that as a lot of app developers are creating like richer, deeper app experiences with kids, there comes a point where you need to collect, PII data to make the experience richer. So whether that's like, Minecraft is coming out with that Minecraft Earth, right? And so that's geolocation. Anytime you share geolocation,
Yep.
it's sensitive data, and you need to get your parental consent. And it's not just that you need to say, hey, mommy, can you let me use it? You actually need to verify that this parent is actually a parent. Or you could just send it to like your second email account and just verify it yourself. So
Yep.
we are kind of looking at the market and saying, okay, a lot of companies are trying to create richer experiences, but some of them are compliant, maybe some of them aren't, or maybe they're not doing it in the best way. How can we help? And so that's kind of the product we really feel like has a lot of growth and a lot of potential. So even folks in the gaming space, as they start age gating, like even like TikTok, I don't know if you heard about their fine earlier this year, where they pretended that there were no kids on TikTok's Musically.
I'm familiar with the product. Yeah. I'm not familiar with the specific legal issue
so they got fined $5 million by the FTC for COPPA compliance issues. So they have the terms and conditions where it says only 13 above can enter, but obviously people don't, people lie to get where they need to go, and I've done that. Everybody has done that, but really, how do you protect kids? So we have that KWS platform that really helps ensure like kids are, given permission. It's not that you can't collect data. It's when you do collect data, you have to ask for the permission and get it done in the right way.
Yeah, I even wonder if there's, at this point, just kind of talking out loud in terms of brainstorming ideas, but just like there's like a Facebook Connect, if there's like a Super Awesome Connect where instead of an age gate, you have to register through Super Awesome and it actually verifies your actual age. So you don't go through like a self-reported, hey, I'm 99, even though it's like a 6-year-old kid, which, my kids do all the time. But whether you guys could actually act as like a certification authority of some kind as well.
There's some interesting points that you make there, and I think that there's a lot of the work that we do in the background facilitates that same kind of experience. So the first thing to point out is when we build the compliance tools in KWS, we have many instances and many large developers and publishers using it. We are able to facilitate some of the stuff you're talking about, some of the fluidity, some of the kind of the removal of friction from the user journey in that way behind the scenes. So if we have an instance of KWS where we know that an email address is attached to a verified adult, we don't have to go back and verify that adult again. That suits the user because they don't have to have endless emails, endless credit card requirements to verify that they're an adult and they're legally seen as a parent. And we can create a much better environment for the whole market. Everyone gets a much better conversion funnel for getting the consent that's required. All of those parent portals are built so that users can change their mind. Everything is legally sound, but it just creates a nicer, better environment for everyone. I also think another thing that you touched on there, which is I would say one of the most significant issues in the kids market at the moment, is that particularly as the legislation ages kids up, which it is. So GDPR came in Europe last year. It allowed different member states in the EU to state the age of a child, which is something that's flexible. You have some markets now saying that an age of a child is 16, not 13. And now you have US debating whether or not they should raise the age to 16. I think the common market driver here is that there will not be less regulation around privacy for kids, or in general, there'll just be more. So the feeling is that as that group of what is defined as an under consent age child, it grows to up to 16, it creates more of a push for more of value in the market, more of a push for people to identify and to shape their products for those users. But it also creates another interesting area, which is kids lie all the time to circumvent the rules that we put in the internet. Okay, when WhatsApp rolled out their new policies to fit to GDPR, I'm pretty sure that no 14-year-old didn't swipe across to say that they were actually 16 so that they didn't lose their WhatsApp account, right? So I, one of the things we're looking at the moment is how can we do that more cleverly? We've got some products in R&D at the moment where we're speaking to some of the largest developers in the world about how could you find out if a user was a kid without asking them. So we've got a new Kid Switch product where it's in development at the moment. We did some PR about it last couple of weeks, but basically we're using all of the signals we have in our marketplace, a great deal of data that we trade, and we're using AI to try and figure out whether that user is, to a high degree of certainty, a child. We're obviously putting in a ton more input in terms of how they're using the device, and we're going to come out with something which we think is going to be very robust to allow developers to figure out who are their kids' users without putting an age gate there that's easily navigatable, at least by a 14, 15-year-old, right? So I think that product is very interesting because it leads to conversations about how can isolating your kids' users provide you value overall and not just value in terms of getting ROI from them in terms of ads. You know, think about a situation where huge developers have a mixed audience. If they were able to isolate those kids' users, they could clean their analytics. They could have a much cleaner view of what was going in their products if they could just take away those users who have no ability to pay. You know, they have no ability to control the ROI levers that the adult users do. So there's a lot of value we feel in providing solutions like that, doing our research and development and deploying it in products that are going to make the internet safer for kids, but also provide value for developers, even if it isn't directly providing ads or doing anything like that.
Certainly, I think the age gate and age verification issue is a problem, but I would say, like, for you guys to be super, super successful, probably the biggest issue, if you could solve for developers, is then how would you monetize kids? If not, some ads make sense, but to your point, you're not going to be able to monetize them as strongly as you would adults in specific sorts of categories. So it seems like if you could come up with a friendlier way, but that does help monetize kids in some way, that would be the ideal scenario. Have you guys put any thought around, any ideas around that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. For me, that leads to the conversation around how compliance regulation can be seen as an opportunity rather than a threat. You know, one of the things we talk about a lot is if you have users who require parental communication, it's seen as a really big issue, right? If you're a developer, and you guys will know this well, all you want to do is remove friction. You know, you don't want any barriers to user just getting in and playing with your products. Anything that you do that puts anything in between that journey is just problematic, and you want to iron it all out. So when you start talking to developers about, hey, you need to send an email to the parent now to get permission to unlock this feature, it's like dynamite amongst that, right? So one of the things we talk about a lot is how can we flip that narrative and see that as an opportunity? You know, how can we look at how engaging that parent is actually going to build the communication track with the parent in the room and lead to better ROI across your other products. You know, if you're a big studio and you're building the narrative with the parent, then when they have the time, could you work with that parent, communicate to that parent, send them offers for the products that you're selling, talk to them about the movie releases that are coming up? Could you know that, have more data on the adults and the family units who are your core users? You know, a lot of parents at the moment, they have the opposite problem. They literally don't know what games their kids are playing. They don't know that their kid's favorite character is Sonic the Hedgehog. He plays the apps every day. It's kind of an unknown to them. So how can throwing visibility on what apps and games are enjoyed by the kid actually be a really positive effect for use in the environment of the parent, which is much more free in terms of the data you can collect, the profiling you can do, and the targeting you can do. I don't think that there is a cast iron answer to your question in the world yet. I think we're waiting for a lot of those answers as to how to derive ROI. How can the mobile market and the app market catch up with TV? You know, we don't really have a conversation about how can you prove value from the housewife for kids buying TV. It's been there for 50 years, and lots of people have spent all their ad budget on it, and lots of animations and kids content has been created forever on the back of the revenue opportunities that come from the retail and the commercial from advertising around the kids market. I think when that catches up, it will provide an answer to your question. But mainly the main one that we would look at is how can compliance, how can all of these things be taken as a way to connect with your users and the parents and the kids that you're connecting with your brand with.
Got it. And just for our audience or people who might be watching this video later, could we talk about more specifically, like with respect to GDPR and COPPA, could you talk about what are the sort of developer requirements from those, two things? Because to some people, they're not quite sure. So if I'm creating a kid-directed app, what does GDPR and COPPA specifically mean to me? What as a developer do I have to do?
Well, the basic underpinning is that you cannot collect any personal information from that user. That's in simple terms. You cannot, if you have identified a user as under the age of consent in any market covered by the global privacy regulations like GDPRK or COPPA, you can't track that user. You can't collect any personal information without depending on what type of information or data you're collecting and how private the information is. You have to get varying degrees of consent from their parent or guardian. So for a developer, that really creates huge problems, because if you look at the world of app development and all of the tools that are built around that to facilitate that, a ton of them collect data. So we've obviously discussed the ad servers involved. They obviously profile users. They collect a great amount of data. We always talk internally about the fact the internet was created to collect as much data as it can and then figure out how to use it after. So all of the analytics packages that you use, a great deal of the embeddable features that you want to use, like the chat functionality, gives the opportunity for users to share personal information. Obviously, features like geolocation, if you took a Pokemon Go or a Minecraft world, then they're looking specifically for data which is personally identifiable, and they therefore require the consent of the parent for that user to enable those features. And if they don't, then they're breaking the law. So I guess not collecting data, not profiling users is the big thing which cuts across all of the tools that a developer would use to build a product.
Right, and the way that specifically manifests is generally an age gate, right? And so like the developer, especially with a child-directed app, would have to put up an age gate where it asks you for your age, and either whether it's a slider, whether it's a button, whether it's like a calculator input, however that's done. And I've experimented with 100 different variations of those. But then if they are below the age of consent, then to your point, can't collect any data, turn off all the behavioral targeting stuff, turn off all, whether it's social features or other features like that. And then I guess what you're saying is in some cases, you also need to get like this parental consent as well, right?
Yeah, depending on the functionality of your product. I think the main point is, yes, an age gate is a solution, but I think there's a slight difference in the two regulations when it comes to that. Like the COPPA regulation states that you need to ensure that you if your content is targeting kids, then you treat them as such, and you uphold the COPPA law. And the GDPR regulation in reverse says you can only treat your users as adults if your site is expressly aimed at only adults. So there's a subtle difference there, but it makes quite a big difference. What it leads to is almost every product needs to be, under GDPRK, needs to be cognizant that they could have kids users in their product, and they need to therefore divide their audience as you describe. So yeah, generally speaking, we're seeing a global, everyone has followed suit in terms of the privacy regulation. So we're seeing a more of a global standard now that under the age of consent, everyone cannot be tracked and you cannot collect any PIR.
Right. Yeah, just to add to that, I think to Joseph's question, I think there's certain data sets or data points that it's not that you can't collect it, it's that before you collect it, you need to get consent, right? And so it's not that, I can never know the age of my audience or like their birthday, so I because maybe knowing the birthday, I can send them like a birthday package, or I can send them like some in-app purchase thing for during their birthday. But it's that before I do that, I need to go through certain steps.
Right. And then I think one other requirement with GDPR is you need to build in a facility so that if a user does ask, hey, get rid of my data, that you're able to scrub all that data, right? And then I think even from like any ad network that collected any data on you. And so, it's funny because some of these ad networks have because of GDPR, have specific teams that are there waiting for developers to reach out to them so that they can scrub all that data, but nobody reaches out to them. So I don't think people are actually, fulfilling their GDPR requirements.
Yeah, I mean, the GDPR is there's specific areas, GDPRK for kids, but a lot of this we're talking about now is just general privacy practice, right? The whole world is getting to terms with the general regulation. I like Tim's quite right. You need to a lot of the work that we do in these areas for large partners is to create the parent portals that are necessary, because not only do you have to gain consent, but you also have to give parents a route to revoke that consent. You need to have the ability to create a two-way dialogue with the parent or guardian so that they can navigate their child's digital journey as they please.
Right. And just kind of like, I don't know if this is a crazy idea, just trying to think of ways to help, but would it be interesting? I'm just kind of, just thinking about being kid friendly and safe. I wonder if it would be useful if you guys actually came up with some kind of rating for different apps, right? So one of the things my wife will sometimes ask me is, oh, one of our kids wants to download this game. Is it safe or not? And whether it's safe from a content perspective, gameplay, monetization perspective, but also like the ads that are going in there, are those safe as well? I mean, I don't think there's any sort of ratings agency right now that's tracking that. I'm wondering if that's something that you guys could do and monetize that somehow.
That's a good idea. Look, there are a lot of people that are looking into this space. There are several safe harbor programs that work with large producers. We actually go through, all of our technology goes through 2 safe harbor programs, mostly to give us every directional input in terms of the regulation as it develops, but also to ensure that every partner that we work with is very reassured about our credentials. I mean, we only build technology for this specific purpose of dealing with the kids market, so we always fly through those tests. But ESRB is an example of a safe harbor program that does a certain amount of the ratings that you're talking about. One thing I should mention is that we actually provide a lot of safety standards for the market.
Great.
If you look at the Safe Ad, the Safe Fan program we run for influencers, all the way through to actually the Safe Ad watermark that we stamp on every creative that runs through our Awesome Ads ad server. That's a mark that gives the child and the user an identifier that they're watching an ad, because you're dealing with kids, but it also gives a mark to everyone from the publisher to everyone in the ads world that ad has gone through our procedures, gone through the human vetting, and gone through our technology, so it's been provided with no data collection and with the right context for the audience who's going to receive it. That's a mark that represents something to the Karoos and the Caps of this world, who are trying to regulate what advertising is seen by which specific demographics within the kids audience. And there are differences, right? A preschooler is very different to a 14-year-old. So that stuff does matter. So we do a great deal of certification and regulation within there. We also run a kid-aware training which goes into brands, whether you're a publisher or an advertiser or anywhere in between in the kid space, and just highlights all of the regulations to you, talks about all of the ways that people have taken missteps and received fines, talks about the regulations in great detail when applied to those partners to help the whole market to move along and navigate better. Okay.
And so just to try and be as helpful to you guys as possible, like, is there, so Paul and I are probably, the type of guys who will create the most nefarious monetization tactics and schemes to to get money from players. So, from kind of, I think we understand that concept pretty well. And from your perspective, trying to, keep kids safe and things like that. But is there anything specifically where maybe Paul and I can put our brains together and try to help you guys out in some way, whether it's, product related or game design related or anything like that?
From my side, I'd love I mean, I'm not sure if it's any tips or hints, but I'd love to hear what your reaction was to the announcements of both app stores in the last couple of weeks about specifically the kids section of their apps and games. It does have an effect for large developers and for games developers.
Actually, I'm not even aware.
You need to, take a look. But anyway, look. It's any advice you can give us about navigating from your perspective what the large challenges are. But you've input a bit already, right? How can we mainly focus on their ROI delivery?
Yeah, I think the trickiest part is, since you do have an AdMon product, is for people to be aware, and then for people to not just do exactly what I was saying, because I think that's what's happening is just age gate, no age gate, age gate, and if they're under the age, just turn off the behavioral stuff, and then just you guys would be another ad network in the mix of other ad networks, and then whether there's a good reason to plug you guys in specifically to make sure that you are in the waterfall or we're getting access to your inventory.
Yeah. So I did have a question on my end. Is just that from Paul and Joseph, your guys' perspective, since you guys created these products, you guys are in the business of monetizing, off your audience. That is perfectly fine. But how would you, from your perspective, if we were to come educate people like in your shoes, and you guys have a directive to make as much money as possible, but what kind of messaging to you would you feel like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, I'm willing to do that for the kids audience? Because currently a lot of people are like, we'll just pretend kids don't exist. We don't acknowledge them, so therefore we won't get in trouble. So what is the most palatable message for you as we go out, talk to, folks like even like NBC Universal? I saw that they had a happy AR game that you can like use AR to like locate something. And it says like, no person under 13 should come in, but clearly like if I was under 13, I could still lie my way in. Right. And so these are the questions of like, how do I educate people and make sure people are, thinking about kids?
I can speak to some of it. Joseph's over here talking about monetizing users, what we're good at. But free to play. I don't want to let that ride on the video on the record. Free to play for me isn't all about that. To me, free to play is a very complicated piece of art that allows the user to decide how much they want to spend. And it's extremely hard to do well. Clash Royale, my nephew played it for years. He's an alliance leader. He's never spent a dime, but Clash Royale is a top grossing app. So somebody spent. So how do you make a piece of art that can actually allow someone to play and have fun for a long time for free, and also to play and spend as much as they'd like and still be successful? That's the key word, still be successful. It's super fun. I love the art form. And once upon a time, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I was making a tutorial. And I started to find all these techniques that I used to experience and getting a tutor. And I was in a class where there's all kinds of people receiving many, many different special needs. There's some people who needed to have color coding over the books. Some people needed audio feedback. People need to do repetition. They need positive reinforcement. And all of these things, I started to say to myself, you know what, if I was really good at like teaching a special education class, then I would probably be one of the best tutorial makers in the world, because video games, what they have are these tutorials, and tutorial really mimics a tutor, right? Mm-hmm. And all methods in games, there's this really fine line, and it's a dark line, and I'll do my best to dispel it my entire career. That free to play is like this big money grab, and it's not looking out for the user, and it's just trying to get everyone right. It's supposed to be really dark, but it's actually, in my opinion, not. The things like stars bursting, repetition, color coding, green arrows bouncing. Good job, you're making progress. This is actually how people learn. When you have someone on a bus, there's a glare on the screen, and they can't see what's going on. They're getting notifications. Their attention span's really low, and they kind of have the mind of someone really young in that moment, right? Somebody who may have trouble focusing in class and so forth. So when I was going to meet with you guys today, and I was like, oh, these guys have expertise in kids games. These guys are probably freaking killer at helping people make games and help people understand those games. Because somebody who understands the kids market, in my opinion, would be extremely useful in getting a game to make sense to everyone. Because, games are extremely difficult to make, to teach. You take a very complicated idea, and then you give it to somebody who's never heard of it before. It's like teaching a kid math in a day. You have so much time. So when I was thinking about what you guys do, I'm not sure what your team is and how much of the video game experience you guys have, but with all these games coming through, and you guys are so passionate about kids games, and kids games are like the heart of tutorials, of teaching things. I think there's probably this whole other side of what you guys may have that you may not even realize, is that everyone needs to understand how to work with a younger audience and an older audience, and you may be able to provide some insight to helping people with tutorials, helping understand what users how young, what's the youngest of spenders that there is, and how they actually were spending, and if they did, like how much, and like how to provide the entertainment on a global value, and like all the different things and fails that you've seen. So like in some ways I was thinking about like, is there things that you guys can tell, if I were to receive your message as a provider to my company, if you were telling me like, look, all of your users are basically kids at some point when they come into the game, and we know tutorials, we have the safety things, and we can take a look at your app and provide you not just safety, but even extreme, detailed expertise on how to get everyone through your funnel. Because just because the app's safe, they're going to come through, kids are going to hit the wall, man, because the tutorial's like, press here, good job, I do, right? So And then on the other hand, I was thinking, man, it sounds like you guys should be a button built right into the phone, It's like something that like just launches with phones. Now this is way bigger. I don't even understand how to do this, but some people work out deals with like Android and they get their app pre-installed on the phone when it's launched. Like when they open it, it's there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't help to think of that. But that is kind of strategy way beyond me. And I don't know how people wheel and deal that kind of stuff. But if Super Awesome was pre-installed on phones and then like parents knew about it and they had to press it and they said, here's your phone. And the kid was like, God damn it, my mom turned this on, right? You know what I'm saying? And now it's just a part of the phone. That's also interesting too. But I think if you were to come at me from a position of how you're useful, I would want to know all of your techniques and all of the games that you've seen and how you can help me make the game understandable for all of the entire audience and be safe. So if I could turn that 13 plus off and have a whole suite, I don't know how I would do it, but if I could make a game that's for literally everyone and it still works, that's kind of interesting to me, But I would be totally interested.
Well, just to kind of riff off of Paul, and just if I can try to synthesize some of what you were talking about, Paul. I think there's two things that you said that are really interesting. One is, guys like Paul and I are more into that hardcore monetization, sort of mental framework, right? And so for us to think about how do you monetize a 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So if you guys were to actually come up with best practices or ways, whether it's subscription, through cosmetics, whatever, and come up with specific monetization techniques and practices, I think there could potentially be some type of consulting practice or something like that, as well as adding on to your existing products in terms of tools to enable those types of monetization techniques. So that would be useful. And then secondly, to Paul, just to complete this thought. So to Paul's point about, having an app preloaded or something, but it might be interesting to have an app that's like a parent app. And I don't think you can do it for iOS, but for Android, so my 9-year-old son has an Android phone and we're going to install Super Awesome on it. And Super Awesome, will basically track all of the games and apps on the phone, and it's connected. And I've got an Android phone with Super Awesome, and I've got the parent account. And if my child installs a game that's rated unsafe, then I get a ping, and it's like, oh, do you approve that this app is that Johnny can actually install this app or not? And because going back to that other thought about potentially rating different games and apps in terms of the gameplay, monetization, and the ads that are running through it, if you guys actually created a system where that stuff is rated, and then I'm on my phone with my Super Awesome app. I've got my 3 kids, and I can kind of make sure that they're using Super Awesome verified apps. That might potentially be something interesting.
Yeah, I think we're doing more and more work with partners and directly ourselves with the main platforms, and I think a lot of people are thinking along those lines. I think we will end up with much greater solutions. I would say that the best, hopefully you guys and the best people in the mobile market, I've met some of them. They're just focused on engagement and usage. Monetization comes if you nail those things. If you get users loving your product, coming back every day, if you're like all of the big guys talking about retention stats out into the future and usage stats that are huge, then all of the monetization solutions that exist in the stores and exist in products are open to you, depending on which kind of product you have, because you will keep those users, you will keep the kind of organic growth of those users, and you will keep the momentum of your product moving forward. And the monetization comes on the back of that. And I think it's a really interesting angle to take, because if you actually looked at a lot of those products, if you took your nephews on Clash Royale is a really great example. I think if you actually found the key users and the users in those products who are kids, you would find some of the most hyper engaged users in any of those products. These kids have a lot of times their own device. They have loads of time to spend in it. They're all digital natives. They grew up with these products. They're intuitive. They go straight in terms of in-depth gameplay, and they also don't have a lot of the roots that we have for a lot of the monetization solutions and other distractions. One of the things we found, when I was at Alpha 7, I put rewarded ads into Alpha 7 with the business, and I really thought, is this going to work? Is the advertiser going to be happy that we're giving this opportunity for the users to have to watch these ads? And it really blew up as an opportunity. And when I think about that now in terms of the kids market, it's an amazing thing, because it's the only thing which is in the hands of the kid. They've got direct control over that monetization, that opportunity to get more energy or to get more virtual currency or whatever it is, and they're epic consumers. Kids are actual epic consumers. When you see that on YouTube, right? Kids content is a vast majority of a ton of the content on YouTube, because kids consume and consume and consume. So exactly as you say, Paul, if we were able to harness the power of those kids' audiences and say, hey, developers, if you knew your kids' audience, it's not about the direct ROI you get, but how about testing your new features on them? Because they're absolutely incredible in terms of their consumption of your products and their knowledge of it and their navigation of it. So I think it all ties back to the same thing. We are aiming to build the tools that allow developers to isolate their kids' audience, to deal with them correctly, but also we're trying to figure out a path to creating as much value as we can from this audience. And there is a lot of avenue there, I think.
Okay.
I totally agree. I think it's definitely changing the way that I think about the games design in the future. I really hadn't thought about the age restriction in a while, but maybe it's possible to pick genres and themes and games and things like that fit all, and then use these special techniques to try to get a wider audience so more people have fun.
Yeah, no, I would say, look, all of this is we're aiming for a direction where this doesn't affect the user, right? The user just comes in, plays your game, and enjoys it. At the back end, we make sure that the data collection, the ads that they see, or the monetization they see, the analytics packages, whatever it is tailored around the user to make sure that their rights aren't infringed, their privacy is respected. But everything else it should be completely oblique to them. They should be able to play the game, enjoy it just the same as every user, not see any of these things. We talk a lot to developers about how to not have a whacking great age gate at the front. We see a solution that's much more subtle and much better for the user than that, and much better for the developer.
Yeah, I think it's great. I wish I had like a really, really banging idea for you guys that would just set you off. I do. I think it's a good cause, and I don't think it's very complicated. I just think there's a lot of education to be. A lot of people would need to be educated on it. There's so many game developers right now, and they're crushing their keyboards, and they're like, me and Joseph just had like 4 meetings today, and everyone's trying to do well out there. And I don't know if they're thinking about this stuff. So education is key.
Yeah, we try and speak to as many people as we can. We have a lot of insight that comes from our social products for kids. It's a lot of that is filled with gold dust in terms of product usage and other stuff. So I think more and more the environment around us will create a narrative where people are asking the questions, and hopefully people like us are springing up everywhere to answer them. This is what really is going to move the market forward, I guess.
And are you guys going to continue to be, it seems like just looking at your product mix that you guys are a bit more focused in terms of the tools and infrastructure side. It's kind of looked like PopJam seemed to be more of a direct to consumer, more, end user related product, but is that also more of, but because you mentioned that, PopJam can be kind of reskinned for brands. Are you guys going to try to make like a specific game or, direct to consumer type of product at all?
I think it's an interesting question. I think direct-to-consumer is part of our social tools, but the majority of that work goes into building the platforms and the tools for other people to use. We are a technology company. We are a B2B company, but I think who knows in the future? There's lots of avenues for us to work towards building out the consumer piece. But I think mostly we're going to be focused on empowering the guys that are real experts on this. We work with the largest brands in the kids space, in the family space, and also some of the largest app developers in the world. So we would really probably for the time being focus on making sure that they are enabled to make the best products, because they're the experts on the direct to consumer piece.
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of like next steps, I don't quite know what could be specific next steps, but I would say that one thing that's potentially possible is Paul and I are starting to work on some game concepts, and when I say we, it's mainly Paul, but that if we can get a if we can get a good design, and then as we start moving forward with the game, that as we think about GDPR and COPPA, that it'd be great to just even have like a public call with you guys where it's like, okay, here's our game design, here are wireframe, here's what our age gate's going to look like, and then how could we integrate like a Super Awesome to make sure that it's kid friendly, kid safe, and things like that. So
we could show people the process if it works for us, because the games I have to build first can't be big, and they can't be too risky because we're so small. And so some of the things I have are like some idle games, possibly some really hyper casual games, and I think that they would fall right into the hands of what you guys work with. So if anything, maybe we're building a product that we could use your service with.
Yeah, I mean, if one thing that comes from this is that you don't dismiss the kids audience when you're thinking about product development or ROI, then that's absolutely delightful. I'm sure that other than that, you'll be speaking to many people who'll be facing challenges about how to deal with kids audiences in their games, and hopefully we'll pop up and drop us an email. Perfect.
Actually, yeah, we actually had a call earlier today that I think you guys could be helpful on. So we'll keep you apprised of some of those types of conversations as well.
Great. Well, anything that we can do, we'd love to come back. We have some of the foremost experts in the space. I'm sure they'd love to join and talk about this stuff.
Awesome.
It was great to trade ideas, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Good to speak to you.
Okay, and congrats on a really great name too. I mean, how can you have a better company name than Super Awesome?
Super Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you guys did a super awesome job.
Super awesome. Yeah, no, it's very
we're trying to radiate some positivity, but maybe not too humble.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, speak to you later, guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.
Bye now.